you have to conquer the fear. I'm going to give you an example. Patient comes in with a sore throat. And, you're pretty comfortable. Sore throat, no problem, right? So, we all know how to treat a sore throat. Patient comes in with a sore throat. And you write them Xiao Cai Hu Tang, right? And you're writing the formula, and all of a sudden the patient says, this is the worst sore throat I've ever had in my life. This is throat-mageddon. This is the apocalypse of all sore throats. I almost feel as if I could take a cauterizing iron and stuff it down my throat. That's how much my throat hurts, and it almost would feel like it hurts less. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa. A patient starts crying. My throat is hurting. My throat. Patient starts crying. You're like, oh shit, this throat must hurt. Must be really, really bad. So then, of course, you're like, whoa. And you're writing your Xiao Cai Hu Tang, and you're like, I give Xiao Cai Hu Tang all the time to patients. Sometimes it's like, do you have a sore throat? You're like, yeah, tiny bit of scratchy throat, Xiao Cai Hu Tang, right? Just a tiny bit, like a little bit right here. And all of a sudden, throat-mageddon personified is sitting right in front of you. And you're like, oh shit, man, this is a problem. So what happens? You get worried. You get afraid. You are all of a sudden afraid that your Xiao Cai Hu Tang is not going to deliver. Your Xiao Cai Hu Tang is not going to get the job done. Because, I don't know, I've never seen throat-mageddon before, right? And I don't know, what do I do? I don't know whether my Xiao Cai Hu Tang even treats Shaoyang disease without throat ache. You know what I mean? How strong is it really for throat ache? I need to make this formula stronger. You're like, I need to add some extra throat herbs, right? So then you're like, oh, I'm a classical practitioner, so what is another classical herb that works well on throat? Jaegung. I'm adding some jaegung to my Xiao Cai Hu Tang. You're like, yes, very good. You're writing Xiao Cai Hu Tang, you've figured it out, you've conquered your fear. And then the person says, you know what? It's probably strep throat, it's contagious. And you're like, oh no. It might actually be bacterial or viral, which makes it contagious. That must be Wenbing, because it enters through throat or nose, through mouth or nose. This is not even Shanghan anymore, right? But you're classical practitioner. You're like, I'm going to stick with my Xiao Cai Hu Tang, but I really want to do Ma Bo Yin Chao San, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stick with my Xiao Cai Hu Tang. But obviously, Xiao Cai Hu Tang cannot be strong enough. The patient says that it might even be strep throat. Come on, it's dangerous, right? So I'm like, I need to put some antiviral, antibacterial herbs in here. So you start adding Banlangen or whatever. And then the patient, all of a sudden, then you write and you're like, aha, I've conquered my fear again, right? I feel better. And then all of a sudden the patient says, yeah, and at night, my throat is so dry. And you're like, oh my God, there's yin deficiency at the same time. This is getting really, really bad. No wonder this is called throat-mageddon. I need to add something for the yin deficiency heat. I'll add some xuan and some beimu as well. Right? And then you feel comfortable again. And then you tell your patient, I got this. No problem. Right? What you just did, this is of course a caricature, but what you just did is basically, you've basically been treating your own anxiety. You haven't been really thinking about the patients. All you have done is you've acknowledged your fear and your performance anxiety. You think that you are selling a result. The patient requires a result, and the result that the patient requires is throat ache be gone. And all you have done is, because you wanted to make sure that you delivered, is you've conquered your fear of failure of delivery. You've conquered your own performance anxiety by constantly modifying the formula to and always thinking, oh, I'm doing it for the patient, right? Because they're suffering. But you've totally stopped thinking in classical way. You've lost faith in your Xiao Cai Hu Tang. you've totally lost confidence in what it is, what your own ability and inability is, right? Because it's one thing that you know your ability, it's another thing that you have to know your inabilities, right? Like what can you not do? Well, you can't, change the way of life, right? You can't change the law of life. You just can't. All you can do is give Xiao Cai Hu Tang, know that sore throat is a Shaoyang pattern, trusting that Xiao Cai Hu Tang fixes that, and knowing that Zhang Dongjing never talked about. But if the sore throat is so bad that the patient calls it throat again, and then you can't use Xiao Cai Hu Tang. There is no such line. Right? So you have to conquer fear. Most of the time, we modify because we're very afraid of not delivering a result. Right? And being afraid of not delivering a result comes into, basically says something about our sense of self-worth and says something about our confidence. Right? How confident are you in yourself? Right? I already talked about faith in the system, right? You have no faith in Xiao Cai Hu Tang. Right there, you showed clearly that you did not trust Xiao Cai Hu Tang to be able to do the job, right? I will address in a little bit why you shouldn't even be making those kinds of assessments, because you don't even have the skill set to make that kind of assessment. But I'll talk about that in a second. But most of that, you basically were, what was I saying again? You were basically treating your own anxiety. All you did is like you have a skewed view of your own sense of validation and self-worth, right? And you are terribly afraid of failing in clinic, which doesn't mean you're actually afraid of failing your patient. It means you're afraid of seeing yourself fail. And if you can't conquer this, you're in the wrong field. You shouldn't be in medicine. You should be like a computer programmer, right? Where everything is exact science. This is not an exact science field. Even when you do everything right, the right formula for the right pulse, for the right symptoms, even in those circumstances, sometimes it won't work. If your sense of self-worth and confidence stands or falls with the feedback that your patient gives you, you are in a very dangerous place. Because all you will want to do is please your patient.
Could I ask you a question? No, what about in this situation, what about heart damage possibility? If it is strep throat?
If you're asking me how we treat strep throat, I'll tell that separately, right?
No.
So if it is strep throat,
Sorry, I don't want to lead you astray.
no, you're not leading me astray. If it is strep throat, let me put it this way. Patient comes in, strep throat, has a Xiao Cai Hu Tang pulse. What formula are you going to give? Xiao Cai Hu Tang. Patient comes in, gallbladder infection, Xiao Cai Hu Tang pulse. What formula are you going to give? Xiao Cai Hu Tang. Patient comes in, kidney infection, Xiao Cai Hu Tang pulse. What formula are you going to give? Xiao Cai Hu Tang, right? So, patient comes in, strep throat, Xiao Cai Hu Tang pulse. Xiao Cai Hu Tang is the formula for the strep throat. Do you have to worry about them having any heart damage? No, because you're treating it. You're treating the strep throat. So if you're treating the strep throat, it'll never lead to heart damage. So you have to trust that when the body talks to you through the pulse and the body tells you, please give me Xiao Cai Hu Tang, that indeed Xiao Cai Hu Tang is the form that is going to turn this whole thing around. And therefore, not ever allow the body to